Another new day filled with brand new Sonic lore. Everybody in the Sonic franchise and in the fandom is going to absolutely love this. As you guys may or may not know, Sega just recently dropped some new character bios for all of the Sonic characters, and it's been a little bit divisive within the community. Also, as you guys may or may not know, I dropped a video on this. Sonic Prime was also confirmed, or at least stated to be canon by the directors of the show. The IDW comics have also been stated to be canon as well, and there's a reason for all this. There's a reason why all these different forms of Sonic media are being claimed to be canon. This is because Sega is hiring a Sonic lore manager to ensure the universe is more meaningfully connected. The social media manager of Sonic, Katie, also tweeted out that Sega put together a small team of us internally, along with the help of talented folks like Tyson Hess, Ian Flynn, and Spirit Sonic. We're working on making the universe and stories more meaningfully connected. So that's the official statement. With the resurgence of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise following the movie, as well as Sonic Frontiers, and hopefully the upcoming Sonic Superstars, hopefully that will be successful as well, Sega would like to tie all of this together because there's been so many inconsistencies with the lore in the past. They want all of Sonic's stories to connect. They want it to make sense. Recently, with the Sonic Fast Friends campaign, though, as I stated before, a lot of people have been divisive, in particular because of bios like Amy Rose and Shadow the Hedgehog. So in today's video, we have updated lore about Shadow the Hedgehog, as well as the rationale and reasoning behind Sonic IDW and Sonic Prime being canon. So let's get into all that, but before we do that, please subscribe to the channel right now. I'll give you a second to do that. And hopefully you guys smash notifications, but let's get into the lore and figure out what all this means. All right, just for context, you guys may or may not watch my videos. I don't really know, but I talk about this a lot. The IDW comics and Sonic Prime are, at least right now, this position is that they're canon. And here's a clip to give you guys context in case you guys are like disagree with me or think that I'm wrong or whatever.
Ability of IDW becoming canon, but that doesn't extend to Prime, right? Even in the first episode, there are some contradictions to the lore that feel intentional, so Prime is flat out non-canon, right?
From my understanding, right now, modern Sonic media is all-inclusive.
So there you have it. The official stated position as of right now is that Sonic Prime is canon. Like I said before, the directors of the show have said as much, so we have to treat it like this is the case. I'm going to be honest, I might take some heat for this, but I actually do think there's no major contradictions that make Sonic Prime not canon. I think it's like the most small, minuscule things. Like people are like, oh, why isn't Knuckles on Angel Island? As if he's been spotted on Angel Island in any like mainline 3D Sonic games since Sonic Adventure 1. Or the Flickies and Badnik stuff, like these like minor little details do not alter the Sonic timeline. I get it. I mean, there's some little inconsistencies, but nothing too major. But also, we don't know how the show ends, so it could all tie together. And that's what Ian Flynn actually said on his podcast recently, and that's the reason for the discussion and the debate for this video. And again, just to reiterate, he also said that IDW is canon. IDW takes place after Sonic Forces, basically the rebuild, post Eggman taking over the world. That's where it starts. The question is kind of when does all this take place in the Sonic timeline? Like when does he meet Tangle and Whisper? Like how will these characters be introduced in future games? That is the first lore drop that we'll talk about. So let's roll the clip and give our thoughts.
Oh, has a question? As someone who just likes the games, barely read IDW, first issues, and isn't interested in going further, what kind of potential impact on the games can I expect from the inclusion of IDW/Prime as official canon? I dread having elements from the comics or Prime directly coming into the games, thus alienating game-only fans who don't/can't read the comics. Given that comics seem to have much more going on than the games in terms of events, dialogue, character moments due to their structure, including IDW comics as canon makes it seem like the canon medium where most stuff happens since Forces, thus a bit alienating to game-only fans. Especially when games nowadays don't release as often as they used to and aren't as narratively intense as a comic series, while the IDW comics have been releasing for 5 years and counting.
A fair concern. And I think to a degree it's new territory for everybody that's largely untested. Because since IDW started, we've had one mainline game.
Yeah.
That's really hard to gauge by.
And we still don't know when the game takes place in relation to the comics. You might, Ian, but
right.
we don't, largely, as an audience. No.
But I think everyone involved is aware of just that concern.
Mm-hmm.
So if Tangle were to show up in Frontiers 2 or whatever, that is not a hashtag knowing smile. That is not me dropping a hint. That's just me giving an example. She would still need to be introduced as a new character. Using Sonic Frontiers as the example by itself, if this was your first game with Sonic, there is a lot of deep character interaction between Sonic, Amy, Knuckles, and Tails that if you haven't played the Sonic series or kept track with 30 years of miscellaneous lore bits, you could potentially be a bit lost. But so long as you understand the core relationships between them, the greater details aren't necessarily necessary for understanding the game. Like, you understand that Sonic and Knuckles are kind of friendly rivals. You don't necessarily need to know that they first met on Angel Island resolving the Death Egg crisis. You don't have to know that Knuckles discovered his history through a flying pink talking orb. That's irrelevant. It's that they are kind of at odds, and, despite that, they still look out for each other.
And you can cut the tension between them with a butter knife.
Sonic and Amy have a very deep relationship. You don't need to understand the roller coaster of Amy's characterization from Adventure onward. You just need to know that they mutually trust and respect each other a great deal. So, same thing. If there's any crossover with the IDW material, then it needs to be presented in a context that is accessible. And that would come from, in the Sonic and Tangle example, they would encounter each other and they would greet each other. There'd be like a little bit of expository dialogue to make you understand that, okay, they're friends, and she's kind of bouncing off the walls fun, and go from there. We don't necessarily have to reference that, she sacrificed herself to help Sonic in the Metal Virus Plague. Is that relevant to the story that's going on? Probably not. Is it something neat for you to read later on if you want to? Sure. But I honestly do not foresee us directly referencing IDW events in the games, because I don't see that being a continuation.
Yeah.
Like, case in point, as of this recording, the Japanese market is just now getting the end of Metal Virus. They haven't even been introduced to Bell or any of Starline's personal arc. They if we released a game within the next couple of years that relied on those, they'd be in the dark. Never mind the rest of the global community. So the events of the games do matter to the comics, and the comics will introduce elements that I imagine can cross-pollinate, but they will hopefully be handled in a way that is accessible to the largest audience of Sonic fans.
Yeah. And would you say the same pretty much applies to Prime as well? I mean, there's some concern about that. I know you can't talk too much about it.
Prime is a kind of a special case, and I can't get into it without spoiling the end of the season 1. So,
right.
And none of this season 1, 2, 3 nonsense. It's season 1. Netflix is just chopping it into pieces.
Thanks, Netflix, for nothing. All right, here's one from...
So a very interesting take right there. I know it was a little bit long. I think the biggest takeaway is definitely about Sonic Prime and what the future of the show is. But basically what he's saying is, how would they handle character interactions that are from IDW? Like, how would they play into, like, the future Sonic games? Nothing there is really too groundbreaking. Obviously, you wouldn't refer to any IDW Sonic events. Even though that they happened, it doesn't really make sense to refer to them in future Sonic media. That's all good and dandy. If someone like Tango was to come to the game, he would give her some context and, maybe some type of introduction. But for the most part, all the events that happened in the past in IDW took place, and they're not really too important to the future of the games, I guess. More so, the games are more important to the future of IDW. Probably because not everyone reads the IDW comics. That makes a ton of sense. Obviously, you shouldn't have to read comic books in order to understand what's going on in a game. I would say the most interesting thing that he points out, though, is definitely what he says about Sonic Prime. Because of the fact that he mentions, obviously, everyone hates that Sonic Prime's canon. I understand all of the concerns as to why people don't want it to be canon or why it doesn't seem canon and things of that nature, but it's very curious to see him say that, like, we're gonna have to watch the ending of season 3, or I guess it's actually cool that he clarified this. Season 1 of Sonic Prime, because clearly there's going to be something that ties the entire story of Sonic Prime together. In addition to the fact that the way he's talking, I mean, maybe it's possible there could be a renewal of Sonic Prime past the first 3 batches of episodes. I would personally like to see that. I know everyone doesn't love Prime, but I wouldn't mind seeing more Sonic media. It's going to be interesting to see how they end Prime, because that, like he said, it's going to tie in to the games, and that's what I'm most interested and curious to see. Like, how is Sonic Prime going to end? How are they going to tie it into the game? It definitely renews my interest in what we can expect from Sonic Prime. So yeah, all that's pretty interesting. Let me know what your thoughts are on these new revelations, whether they're significant, especially about Sonic Prime, and kind of what your thoughts are on the series. But new revelations have been made about Shadow the Hedgehog, and this is where it gets very interesting and opens up the room for discussion. So I did a video covering all this recently. You can go check it out if you want. Sega updated the character bios for all the Sonic characters, and Shadow the Hedgehog was one of them. And one of the big revelations that they made is Shadow's ambitions to save the world, because he wants to fulfill his promise to Maria. But a lot of people had issues with this because it kind of retconned Shadow 05's story that says that Shadow doesn't care about Maria anymore and he wants to move forward with his life. Personally, I'm not really too upset about that. I do think that Maria should always be like a driving factor for Shadow. I mean, that's like his main motivation to almost destroy the world, and his main motivation for saving it several times. I don't think a big chunk of your life just goes away like that, like some people think, just because at the end of Shadow the Hedgehog he like throws her picture away. So that's like the main topic for today's discussion. But you know, they also talk about his relationship with Rouge and Omega and how they're not truly friends, which a lot of people didn't like. But let's see what Ian Flynn recently just said about Shadow, because it is very interesting.
Here's a question from Joseph. What is up with Shadow's bio on the Fast Friends Forever website? According to the bio, Shadow is fighting to protect the planet, but only for the sake of Maria's memory, while having no personal investment in the planet itself. I don't know how important these are to the series or characterization, but wouldn't making this aspect of his character the main reason for his protection of the planet be a regression and a contradiction to his development during Shadow the Hedgehog's final story? I know he still thinks about Maria due to the Sonic Channel stories, but we also know he decided to stand up for humanity himself while Black Doom was manipulating and pelting him with only bad memories. Assuming these bios aren't just oversimplified for marketing reasons, how come he's going back to doing everything for Maria's wish if he already did all that without those memories, learned to move on from his past and her promise, and was written in 06 to show himself as a hero on his own terms?
That is a very good question. It is very valid, and I cannot talk about it right now.
Well, I guess this is the situation we're in.
That is not a hand wave. This is very legitimately, there is other stuff that plays into this that I cannot get into just yet. So hold your horses.
Is this a hashtag knowing look moment? Like, maybe not a smile,
this
but
is a hashtag knowing smile combo.
Oh, combo breaker? No combo breaker. Okay. Levi C has a question.
So that right there is where it gets very interesting when they talk about Shadow the Hedgehog, because clearly something's about to go on. I mean, as you guys know, they've been updating the lore. Like, we literally just got an updated lore background for Team Dark. A lot of people didn't like how Sega said they're not friends and stuff like that. They didn't like Shadow's motivation for saving the world being Maria. I do think that Shadow should always cherish Maria, but the Team Dark thing is definitely wild. Like, they should all be friends. But the way that Ian Flynn was talking, and the way that he was very like, I can't talk about it right now, stuff is in motion, it's about to happen, it seems like something is going to go on with Shadow, whether it's going to be touched on in the IDW comics, Sonic Prime, or a future game, maybe future game announcement, I don't know. But we're going to see some really big revelations for Shadow. We didn't see him in Sonic Frontiers, we only see him in the IDW comics, so the lore could be coming for either a future Sonic game or IDW comics. I'm not 100% sure, but between Ian Flynn's statements about Sonic Prime and Shadow the Hedgehog, it seemed like this was the most relevant and important to talk about, and I'm very excited to see what the future could bring, because you see Ian, I mean, the way he's talking, he's like, yo, I really can't talk about this right now. So, you know, guys, make sure to check out my Fast Friends bio in order to get the full context and kind of continue that discussion over here. Let me know what you think is going to happen with Shadow. Is it going to be a new game? Is it going to be IDW stuff? Let me know down below. Let me know what your theories are, and let me know if you like the current characterization of Shadow.